Welcome to Speak as One. I'm Julie Coriath. Today we have with us Josh Swanson. Hi, Josh.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I saw that you were on our friend Travis's Sober Stories, and I reached out to you, and
You did.
It's just been great getting to know you.
You as well. I love what you're doing. I love what you're creating and you're building, and excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Well, we first started talking about, when I reached out to you, it was like, wow, congratulations on being sober, and I didn't realize when I said that to you that you had been sober since you were 19 years old.
That's kind of wild. Yeah.
It's kind of wild for somebody like me because it's been 4 years. And I was thinking it had only been like a year for you, and I was like, oh, wow, it keeps getting better. I know.
Yeah.
And actually, it's been since I was 19.
Yeah. No, it catches a lot of people by surprise, I guess, that don't know me. Because it's just how I kind of live life these days, and but yeah, it was 19. It was a lot of circumstances that led up to it, and none of us get there because we're doing it the right way. So,
That's true.
It's been the biggest blessing of my life, though.
Yeah, I feel like most people that needed to make that step usually say that, biggest blessing. Yeah, so I'd love to start there, and that is learning about the circumstances that led up to that, and knowing like where you were raised and
all the things.
All the things.
Yeah. So I was born in Oklahoma City. My parents were. Mike and Holly Swanson, and my dad was, we kind of, as most Oklahomans, kind of like out in Midland, I grew up in the oil business. And so my dad was president of an oil and gas company. We played golf, a lot of OU football. And, I had a sister that was 5.5 years younger than me as well. And so, for the first 7-8 years, it was pretty idyllic. I played every sport under the sun, did all the things, and when I was 8, my parents got divorced.
Were you expecting that?
I think when you look back, when I look back at it, it's kind of one of those things that what I remember are a lot of conversations happening. I don't remember what the conversations were about, and I knew my dad drank a lot. I didn't know the entire details of what was going on, and one night he packed his bags and he left, and then we basically saw him on whatever the day it was Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and then every other weekend, and so it was dramatic change in our life, for sure.
How did you handle that then? Were you
then
you were so young, but do you remember having certain feelings or emotions around it, or?
Yeah, I do. It was not common, and so, and there were circumstances around it. We had another family in our neighborhood who he basically left with that woman, and so it was like it was kind of a big thing, and it just didn't happen in the 80s in Oklahoma City, at least to my knowledge as an 8-year-old at that time, right? And so it stunk. He was my best friend and all the things, and now I didn't get to see him all that much, and they didn't have a great relationship, when the divorce happened, and so it was just it was a lot. It was we were as far as I knew, we were kind of the first ones in our neighborhood, or that I knew of, that went through it. So it was different for a while, and then he comes from a big family. My dad kind of is the oldest of 5, and so I have an aunt and 3 uncles, and alcoholism just kind of ran in the family. And so about a year and a half after they had been divorced, he committed suicide, and it was 3 weeks before my 10th birthday. You just never forget the day, and it was just devastating.
How did you find out? Was your mom open about what had happened? Did you know right away that this is what had happened to your father, that he took his life?
I mean, when you go back to the day of, it's almost my sister and I were at daycare, and my mom came to pick us up, and she was basically like, "Hey, I have to tell you something about your dad." And it's like, what is it? What is it? He's coming to get us. He's coming to get us. Because we had just seen him, or we were supposed to see him the next day. We had just seen him that last weekend. I believe it was a Tuesday, and I think we were supposed to see him on Wednesday. So I was like, oh, is he coming to get us tonight? Is he coming to get, it was this whole thing. And finally, my recollection was that we were in the car pulling into the garage. I may have this all screwed up, but I kept badgering her about, like, what's the news? What's the news? What's the news? And she finally just was like, your dad's dead. And I mean, as a 9-year-old, like, what do you say? And as she continued to tell the story, yeah, she was very honest about what it was and what he did. And, I wanted to go over there. I wanted to see him again. I wanted all those things because he was my hero. He was my best friend. And, the thought of growing up without him, I mean, it wasn't even there yet, but it came very quickly of like, oh my God, all the things we're never going to be able to do.
Yeah, can't imagine.
No.
Yeah. Did you know, you said he was an alcoholic, or alcoholism ran in their family. Did he show signs of mental health issues? And you may not have known that at the age of 9, but after finding out more as you grew older, is it something that you blame more on alcohol, or did you think that there were mental health issues, a combination for both? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Was it something, were people shocked by hearing that he took his life, or was it something that people were like, oh yeah, he had been struggling with sadness or depression?
No, I think people were shocked. I think he had a lot of friends, and I mean, he'd gone through a lot of struggles. There was, the 80s in Oklahoma, and especially the mid-80s, there was a big rise in oil. There was an oil crash later on after he passed away. There was also, the precipice of everything that happened was his alcoholism had gotten worse. And yeah, I mean, he drank a lot, I think. But as I looked around, all his friends drank a lot too. Like, everybody always had a cocktail in their hand. It was kind of prime time oil and gas world, big furs, big belt buckles.
Yeah.
The 80s, it was urban cowboy in real life. So that wasn't really the thing. And I think kind of what led to it was, there was the Penn Square savings and loan crisis in Oklahoma City. The bank actually crashed. He had some money in the bank, and and he just felt like he wasn't going to recover personally from relationships that ended into this business deal. Like, nothing was going his way, and it was well thought out. I mean, he wrote notes and letters to my mom and his family, and it was planned. So he had a plan, and unfortunately he was successful in his plan, and as I've gone through, I've read the letters, and I'll go back every, 5, 8 years, 10 years, whatever it is, and read them again, or read it again. And yeah, he detailed in there that the therapist he was seeing at the time wanted him to go get some help. He was struggling. Mm-hmm. He didn't know how to ask for it.
Yeah, especially back then.
No, I mean, it's hard now, especially back then.
I mean, well, it's still the number 2 cause of men is death by suicide.
Yeah.
And so even though we have more resources than they did back then, it still is clearly an issue.
It's a massive issue. It's not only, that high for men, and I don't remember the age range, but it's something like 35 to 50 or 40 to 55 or something like that. But it's also risen up to number 2 for 14 to 24-year-olds, I believe.
Yeah.
Which we talk a lot about different epidemics, and to me, that's one that is staring us right in the face that we're not talking about. I know being that age, going through what I went through, like it was on my mind after that.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Yeah, because you hear of people say that whenever one person does take their life, that it usually can affect others, and some of them are successful, and some of it is just thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things about suicide, and I'm not a doctor, but just from hearing so many people talk, one of the things I've started to understand is that there are a lot of people that have thoughts about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can almost normalize the fact that, hey, it's okay, sometimes it's hard to be in this life.
Yeah.
And that's just a thought, it's just a part of you. There's still so much more life to live, and so many challenges you're going to get through, but it's still, there's a lot of stigma around suicide.
There is.
Specifically.
Yeah. And around the thoughts around it.
Yeah.
Right, around the thoughts of this world would be better off without me, or the reactions that parents have to a child saying that, right, which is scary. I know if one of my kids came to me and said it, I would be scared. I'm much more educated than most on it,
right.
But there would still be that gut reaction of, oh my God.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But no, I think that I believe that back in those days, suicide was not something that was readily available reading, viewing, knowledge to any of us. I believe it only affected those who were affected by it. Mm-hmm. And so for me and for my sister and for the people around us, I truly believe it was only an option to those of us who had seen it or it affected us.
Yeah.
And so, did I think more about it in those days? Absolutely. I mean, there were, a big part of my story of getting sober was I would drive up and down Highway 1 in California when I was going to school out there at the very, very end. And I didn't have the courage to drive off the cliff. I was hoping a tire would blow or something would happen. And that was a big part of it.
So this tragic event happens to you in your life. You're having thoughts. Did you start seeing a therapist, or how did you heal from that? And once again, we're talking about the 80s, and it's not like you just send your kids to therapy in the 80s.
No, you don't. Yeah, I mean, my mom was great. So one of the big benefits that, and one of the biggest credits I give to my mom is we were never shy about talking about it. Mm. We were never shy about, and almost to a shocking way to other people. When people would ask me what happened to my dad, I would just tell them he committed suicide. I mean, it wasn't, I didn't do it, but it would shock people that we were that open about it.
Right, yeah.
So,
good for you.
I remember seeing a therapist probably a few weeks after my dad died, and I may have even been in therapy before that when they got divorced. I don't remember, but
right.
I know I've seen one. I was very consistent on seeing one from that time. For a few years, I saw one in high school who was an amazing lady. And then when I got sober, my uncle, who helped me get sober, introduced me to a gentleman named Boyd Lester, who just completely changed my life from a therapeutic standpoint.
So did you feel like alcohol had become a problem for you, or was it that you were almost just so scared about becoming an alcoholic and what happened with your father?
Yeah, so, I guess my drinking kind of started in high school. My mom got remarried to a guy, and there were times in there where he thought, a kid having a drink or whatever was kind of cool at a party or whatever. And I believe, and this is my own belief, is that, alcoholism is a bit like a light switch in us. And you know, we can take a lot of drinks and maybe that light switch doesn't get turned on, but once it gets turned on, it's on, and to get it off takes a lot of work. And I come from a long line of, you know, alcoholics and drug addicts and whatnot. I mean, it runs rampant in my family. And so when that got turned on, it just, as time went on, it went. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, my story is I came back from Cal Poly on Christmas break. I had a dinner with one of my uncles who, and, you know, he kind of saw some things that were not normal. And we went and had lunch with my other uncle, who I'm super close to this day. And he's like, hey, man, I think you need some help. And I was like, man, I'm 19, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. Whatever. Fast forward a week or so later, I'd gone out on New Year's Eve, and it was just a complete mess. Mm-hmm. And I went in and asked for help. And from the moment I asked for help, I don't know that his feet touched the ground, but we were in his car to an outpatient place, and yeah, it all happened. Like, in my mind, it all happened super fast.
Like you said, I need help. You went to an outpatient facility, and
bam, here we are. I took these assessments. It was the first time in a long time I was honest about my drinking and the drugs I was using. And this gentleman named Art Christie came in and looked us in the eye, and he was basically like, you're off the charts. You're in the advanced stages of acute alcoholism and drug addiction. Really? And he was you know, his message was, you're either going to go to jail or you're going to die. I'm probably going to die first, but, you know, based on what you told us in these assessments, you're this far down the line. And what do you say, you know, at 19? I didn't want to end up like my dad. So the other option was to quit.
Yeah. So did you go back to California, or did you stay there?
No, I stayed in Oklahoma and actually started going to a bunch of meetings. Saw Boyd, was actually enrolled at school at OU, and then that summer I moved to Dallas and lived in Dallas for a couple of years and did odd jobs, different things, and found a real great, you know, I had a great sober community in Oklahoma. I found another great sober family in Dallas who was just amazing. And, you know, I've kind of always done things my own way and, you know, not done it necessarily by the book. And so, yeah, as a 20-year-old moving to Dallas on your own, trying to be sober and do these things probably wasn't what the doctor would recommend, but I did it. And it was 2 transformative years for me of building friendships, relationships, and whatnot with people, and having to figure it out on my own through a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I don't know about you, but I feel like asking for help, I don't know if that's like one of the symptoms. if alcoholism runs in your family, if you yourself are or whatever, but it just seems like a lot of people who are sober that I know now, we all have talked about times when it's, you know, you want to do it on your own. Like it's really hard to ask for help.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's not one of the signs or the symptoms, but I'm just saying, do you feel like, have you heard that?
I have. I think asking for help is a practice.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's a huge practice. I think it's and I think it's something that it's like anything. It's like working out. It's like anything you want to get better at. Like, the more you do it, the better you get at it. To where now I've got a pretty close group of guys that if I need something, they're on call. Like, and they know it, and it's, you know, whatever it may be.
Right.
But it's not taught. It's a lot like kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like, it's just not taught to ask for help, to say I need help, to say I'm struggling. You know, it's viewed as something's wrong with you or something's wrong with me or whatever it may be. It's just not a process that we teach very well yet.
No, I always go back to this. When I went to trauma treatment, the very last exercises that we had to do was we were blindfolded. We had to hold on to each other, and we were led out into this this ropes course.
Oh,
and
blindfolded?
So,
Oh,
you couldn't see. So then when we get out there, they bring out your hand, and you have to latch onto this rope, and you just have to follow this rope until you say something. And we're like, what do we say? Like, I don't know. We're just going around this rope, and it feels like you're kind of going in circles, and you're like, I think I've been to this same area. It's the same tree, because it kind of goes around these trees, and you're like, what am I doing? And so you start to see people, like, they apparently asked the right thing or said the right thing, And then I finally just got to a point where if it would have been my first day at treatment, I would have been dead last. I guarantee. But I was like, I need help.
that was it.
That was it.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I was wondering, like, my questions are like, are you up high on these ropes? Are you doing all these things? I'm like terrified of heights. I'm like trying to figure this out.
No, you're just walking on the ground, and you have to.
That just gives me the cold sweats even thinking about, like, blindfolded ropes. Like, not, yeah.
I mean, and it does, and but that was the point. I mean, and you couldn't scream it out. That was another thing. Like, you had to raise your hand. They would come over, take you aside, because they don't want other people figuring out what it is. Like. But it was the most impactful, well, not the most, one of the most impactful things I've really learned about myself. And, if you're in that situation, it's already kind of scary enough. So, I
mean, I can't imagine. Yeah. It's a practice that, to me, so in Oklahoma City, I was fortunate enough to be in a men's home group. And it was... I had a great sponsor when I got sober. And then I had 3 or 4 guys who, like, just kind of took myself and some other guys under their wing. And me and another young guy, we actually, with one of the older guys, started a young people's meeting in town. But we had this great men's home group who had probably 30 to 50 guys every Sunday night that would get together and meet. And to watch other men sit in a room and talk about things that you would never talk about outside of those rooms, and then to say, I don't know how to deal with this, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know what the solution is, and I don't know if what I'm doing is right, whatever it may be. And nobody was there to give them answers. People were just there to listen. And it really has, that group has stuck with me to the, there's still guys that are on call, and still guys I call and talk to. It's not every day. It's not twice a year. Sometimes it's once a year. It's we check in and we talk. And my best friend in the world came from this program. He's still my closest friend today. That we don't talk nearly as much, but he's like my brother. And
I think what's so important too about AA or groups like this that you're talking about is that when you go in and you hear other people's stories, it helps break down the shame that you feel inside, because there's other people going through it.
Yeah.
At least that's how it felt for me. It's like, one, you're not alone. 2, I remember every time I would go in there, I'd feel just the slightest bit, a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
A little bit lighter. Like, I can breathe a little bit more. Oh, no, there's other people going through these things, and just in total different levels,
So that word shame is interesting, right? Because I think that, like, I believe the 12 steps would work for a lot of people that don't have addiction problems.
100%.
Right? Like, they're just a great thing to live by. You take
Absolutely.
out some of the words, change up some of the phrases, whatever it may be, and I think you've got, like, all these things that are going on. Speak as One is one of them, right? It's all about mindfulness, wellness, all these things, right? Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson built an entire mindfulness wellness program based on meditation, acceptance, gratitude in the 1930s or 40s, whenever it came about. They wrote a book about it. They wrote 2 books about it. They created all these meetings of these people. And so I wonder, right, like it's Alcoholics Anonymous, and I just wonder if we were to take away, because the and I don't know how it was for you, I know for me it was beat so hard into my head that this anonymous part of AA was so big and so scary that if you ever talked about what went on inside of those rooms, outside of those rooms, you would almost be brandished not a good AA person.
Oh, interesting.
And so I wonder, if because to me there was a bit of shame of who's watching me walk into these rooms. If we just peeled the curtain back on it and we're like, this is what it is, does it take away the shame for everybody that's inside of those rooms, but also teach lessons to people outside of those rooms?
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I stopped 4 years ago, I didn't feel that so much. Now, I felt shame that I was going because where my life had headed.
Right.
But I started telling people immediately, one, because I knew that if I told people I was going, it would hold me accountable. Like when I say I'm going to do something, I try to be a woman of my word, And I'm like, oh, I'm saying it. It's got to happen.
It's going to happen.
But I remember how hard it was saying I'm going to AA.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, of course, I don't feel like that. And unfortunately, I don't get to go like I did back then. But, but so I didn't get that kind of, like shame if you tell people or whatever.
Right.
But I feel like.
Did you ever talk to people though that had that, like walking into the rooms, they were kind of like, who's going to see me walk into this room?
So I'll tell you this. When I decided to stop drinking, I was at a point in my life where I was having so much social anxiety around everything that I was the last person in, so I didn't have to talk to people, and I was the first person out.
Yeah.
And I never talked. I mean, I had just grown so painfully shy. Like, went from being, a pretty outgoing person. I'd say I'm like a little bit more introvert, but extrovert too, to like I'm felt so shy and like in this bubble and just so much social anxiety I couldn't. So I didn't, I had an amazing sponsor, and she helped me through, and she encouraged me to talk, and I just couldn't do it.
I've just always...
So that's probably why I didn't get the whole, like...
No, I get